How's everyone doing? How was lunch? Are you still awake? Why don't you all get up and just do a couple of stretches? Come on. Come on, let's do it. Okay.
Jumping jacks.
All right. So it gives me great pleasure to chat with Greg and Ryan today. One thing you would notice about both Greg and Ryan are that they look just like you. I mean, other than their skin color, they're white. But if you look at ISB students, they're just like you. So I feel like the students really are looking up to you to see what you've done. You have the same kind of energy and passion to do something different. So let me start with you, Greg.
Sure.
Greg went to Wharton and then he came to Los Angeles to go to the other school, not UCLA. But he decided that that wasn't good enough for him, so he left. And he came to India. Greg, I mean, what happened? Why India?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, yeah, you know, for me, actually, it goes back quite a ways, even to the time I was at Penn. So actually, I was sort of a double major. I was straddling between international relations and finance.
And finance.
And
see,
so,
everyone starts in finance, guys.
I'm retired from that.
Retired, yeah.
Yeah, ex-investment banker, but yeah. No, so I was, even undergrad, actually, we studied India and China, and I realized I did not speak Mandarin, and I didn't think I was going to ever learn Mandarin, so I said it has to be India. But from an early age, I think the problem statements and the amazing opportunity in India was always very clear. But coming out of school, my background, even though I was a finance guy, I was really, first and foremost, I was considering myself an environmental guy. I always thought about sustainable development, thought those sort of ecosystem level challenges were just so integral to be, have to go and aggressively solve over the next 30, 40, 50 years. And so I was working within renewable energy, clean tech in New York, but we had an office in Hyderabad right here, over in Secunderabad actually. And so we were doing a lot of deals within wind, solar, energy storage, and I just love the opportunities that were going on. This was like 2008 to 2010. But I realized that the government, it was very challenging because to do this at scale and to really disrupt, it was going to take huge amounts of capital and huge amounts of time. And as a young 25-year-old, I was very impatient, still fairly impatient today, but I think what I realized was that you can actually do something really disruptive within transportation and mobility without the governmental intervention. And you could do it through technology from the ground up, sort of leveraging network effects, social media, et cetera. And it was a total white space. It was an ocean. I mean, no one was doing anything within car sharing or shared mobility more generally. And so this was right around the time that Uber and Ola were just starting to come up. And so felt that this was the right time and the opportunity, and it was just too good of a time and opportunity to pass up.
And you had been to India before or not?
I had. So I actually, before starting at that other school, I was 3 months in India.
3 months.
And so I was roaming around 25 cities, 12 states in a span of about 3 months. And so that was pretty awesome, not just for the great food.
So I still don't believe you. I think, was there like any romantic interest? No.
No. I mean, not at that time, but yeah.
Not at that time. Okay,
time.
all right.
Yeah.
Because, people do crazy things only for when your girlfriend tells you something or, wife or something. So that was pretty bold move. So I'm going to come back to this idea of how it has been for you to be in India. But let me talk to Ryan now. You've been here almost a year now.
Yep.
And you are basically a New York person. And you've been, so he calls himself not a CEO, but CWO, right?
Chief WeWork, Chief CWO, yeah, Chief We Officer.
CWO, okay, awesome.
I didn't pick that name, by the way.
Okay.
It was designated to me.
Do you like it?
I didn't have a choice. Yeah, I mean, I think it talks about, the key word there is we, right? And our whole business is focused around community and building community. So I guess they put that in there so I wouldn't remember what my job, I wouldn't forget what my job was.
I see. Yeah. So you've been here a year now.
I've been here a year, yeah.
Tell us what it's been like.
It's been fun. First off, I would say it's an honor to be able to speak at a business school that I wouldn't be able to get into. My GMAT score definitely wouldn't have cut it here. But it's really been amazing. I mean, I think the one thing we were talking a little bit about earlier is that the great thing about India and the great thing when you move here compared to other places is the DNA of this country is in community, right? And it's through family and being close to your family. And when I moved here, and I lived in a few other places around the world, but when I moved here, just the welcome and the inclusiveness that you feel within the culture here is something that makes it a lot easier to transition into a role here.
So in some sense, the DNA of WeWork in India was already there. I mean, we are very used to the sharing economy. We share everything, yeah? We have, so has that been different from where else you work? You were in New York and you were in Amsterdam, and then you came to India. Is it different?
Sure.
Or?
So yeah, to give some context, I've been with WeWork for about 6.5 years. When I started, we had about 35 employees. We had 5 buildings. We didn't know what the hell we were doing. And we were just trying to figure it out. And I worked in New York for 4 years and then moved to Amsterdam for 1.5 years and have now been here. But I would say that cultural piece, because we are a community company and we focus on community, it actually makes our jobs a lot easier because it's already inherent, from the way people eat with one another. And it makes us change the way we design buildings a little bit and make us change the way we try to curate that community. But I would say it's built into the DNA, as you referenced, and it's made things just much, much easier than it has been in other parts of the world.
Okay, I'm going to ask you both a difficult question, and if you want to go off the record, just say it's off the record, and we'll make sure it doesn't. Doing business in India is not easy.
That's a fair statement. Yeah, no. So
did you have to bribe anyone?
No. Well, we did not have to bribe anyone. I think what we've realized more than anything, and to the point around community, I think it's really, I would extend it further as well, into the business community. But for us, when we were just starting off, we were very fortunate. We couldn't have done it alone. I certainly couldn't have done it without great local supporting partners. And the ecosystem, right, from whether you think about like for our business, so car dealers, or you look at other partners.
Okay, let me make sure I understand. Having a local partner, what's going on there?
No. So
are you saying that you didn't have to bribe anyone, but you just passed it on to somebody, or what?
No. So I mean, if you look in our business, I mean, fundamentally, firstly, it's a fully digital business. So the transaction exists between a user or renter who is doing a payment digitally, and then we're obviously providing a service for the same. So I think the fact that we don't really have any sort of offline transactional components, I think that of course alleviates and frees you from anything which you would see in maybe some other sort of very local offline businesses. So I think fortunately that has never been obviously something that's in the purview of our business.
That's encouraging. I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah.
Right.
No comment. No, I'm kidding.
Okay.
I'm kidding. No, I would say, to second what Greg said, I think having local partners is so important. When we started scaling, WeWork opened up our first international location in 2014, which was United Kingdom. And, we went in, I think, with the humility of, we have no idea how to operate in the UK. We have no idea how to operate in Brazil or in China or in India, wherever it may be. And when you go in with this humility of, like, I don't know, I need help, and you find local partners that have kind of the same ethos and the same belief in the mission that you're trying to accomplish, who have the local expertise to actually execute on that, those are usually the partnerships that really allow you to be successful in those markets that you're going into.
Okay, so I'm going to do something unusual. Usually what happens in panels is that, we talk and we say, we have time for some questions, and then we say one question. I'm going to go to questions right now, and I'm going to moderate the questions. So the deal with the questions is, do we have questions already? Okay, the deal with the questions is, I'm going to ask the audience also to participate. There are 2 rules. Your first sentence should be a question. It should end in a question mark. And there should be no second sentence. Okay? Yeah. So those are the rules. Please ask a question, and if the question is not appropriate, I'm going to kill it. Okay? So I'm going to use my... So you have some questions already, or you have people?
We have people.
Okay. So why don't you call on people, and then I'm going to come back. I'm not done, but I think I want the audience to be engaged more.
The first question is by Harsh Gupta.
Harsh Gupta, where are you, Harsh? Okay. And if you know who the next person is going to be, tell them to give them the mic already.
Hi, my question is to both of the panelists. So we've seen a lot of sharing economy models in transportation, in co-working. So what are the new sharing economy models in different industries that you foresee coming up in the next 3 to 5 years?
Okay, so the question is, we know that you are going to make it. So I think he's giving you a positive thing that, yes, WeWork is working, Zoom car is working. What do you see on the horizon?
Sure. Yeah, I can tackle it first. I think it's fascinating and something that we, of course, think about quite a bit. And just pull back for a minute and talk from the perspective of a little bit broader context where, I think in the 5 years, 6 years I've been living in India, I've seen a dramatic transformation in terms of mentality and mindset going from, okay, I think ownership, yeah, I think maybe not today, but in the future that'd be really nice, and okay, I want to own, to now this notion of, it's not about owning, it's really just about access. And we're seeing people define themselves from a character standpoint, from a personality perspective, and just overall identity is like, okay, what can I access, when, where, how can I do it frictionless, and then also what are those experiences that it can enable. And when you think about mobility, all it is, it's really just, mobility in and of itself is useless, right? What is it? It just enables you to get from one place to another and have some form of an experience. Or accomplish something. I think that's really at its core nutshell. So I think that's just a framework where people are valuing access as opposed to ownership. They're valuing experiences. Now, specifically to that though, where we see it going, you're starting to see disruption everywhere. Whether it's what the two of us are doing, or whether you think about companies like even Rent-A-Mojo, which is designed around sort of renting and subscribing and sharing. And so you're seeing whether it's for furniture, whether it's for even clothes, everything is actually going in this direction. And I think what you're finding is the possibilities to have really innovative subscription type services where you can bundle and you can actually layer in many different sort of I would say value propositions to the user. I think that's where you're going. You're going towards more sort of bundled types of sharing. So you're looking at it not sort of independently, but a little bit more holistically. And I think that's where you're going to see altogether different sort of value propositions come up over the next couple of years.
I would say, yeah, I would say, and it's kind of a little bit of a shameless plug, but I would say co-living is going to become a lot bigger in India. When you think about demographic trends, you have 600 million people that are under the age of 30. And more of those people are moving into cities, and those cities don't have the infrastructure to actually accommodate all these people moving to cities. I think as culturally things change a little bit and you see people young people moving from city to cities more than they have in the past, they also, one of the challenges in the world right now is this idea of being a part of a really big city and feeling very lonely. So if you're moving from Bangalore to Delhi, for instance, you want to land and you want to have a community around you that can support you. So co-living, I think, is something that, because of the lack of real estate and also because there's going to be more mobility amongst a very, very large group of people here in India, I think there's a huge opportunity to really create living environments that really support people in that growth.
I was a little worried when you said co-living. I thought you were talking about like the death of marriage as an institution, or you weren't talking about that, or maybe you were.
I was not talking about that. So just so co-living essentially is, we have a product called We Live, which we have in New York and Washington, D.C., which is essentially going into an office building or going into a residential building, taking a smaller apartment, but that apartment having huge common spaces that really bring together community. So, the idea came from this of when you're in a elevator in a large residential building in New York, you get on the elevator and everyone looks down at their phone and no one talks to one another. And I used to live in a building like that, and there were 15 apartments on that floor, and I didn't know one person on that floor. And think about the missed opportunities there of all of these amazing people that you have living on your floor, and you don't even know who they are. So by creating a community where you can actually have programming and have events where people live, especially when they become more mobile, that can be really, really powerful and impact people both from a business standpoint, but from a personal standpoint as well.
So tell me a little bit more about WeWork. This is what is very hard to create, is to create that culture, that cultural space where people interact and benefit from each other. It's not just about having a desk space with a laptop, right? It's more than that. And you said something about creating events. How do you do that? I think that's...
Sure. Well,
in ISB, it's very easy. We put them all together and they party all night and they work together. So it works out very well here. But in general, how does it work with the WeWork space?
So full disclosure, it's a lot of that as well, right? Just getting beer and getting some tequila, and usually people spend a lot more time together. But if you think about it really at a high level, human beings spend about 85% of their time in buildings, right? Whether it's their home, whether it's their office, whatever it may be. And you guys know how much you work now and how much you're going to work in the future. A lot of that time is going to be spent in the office. And think about if you're in an office that actually feels good, that makes you feel engaged and makes you feel, a positive energy. Think about how much that can impact your life at a higher level. So our main focus is really to use space as something that can bring collaboration amongst people. So we do that from a number of different things. We do it both physically within the space and the way we design the space. So, making hallways a little bit tighter so people actually bump into one another and have those conversations. Having a really good food and beverage experience where people can, especially here in India, people can bond over that. And then really focusing on events, everything from lunch and learns that help you to grow your business to happy hour events in the evening to something that we did a month ago in the UK, which is called WeWork Summer Camp, where we do a full festival that focuses on health and well-being for our members. So, at a macro level, events like that, but on a day-to-day level, really focusing on events, and also having a community management team on hand in every building that should know every one of our members and what their needs are, and should be the facilitators of collaboration that bring people together so they can help each other grow their businesses.
So you mentioned food, which is solid, beverage, which is liquid. How about the third one? No, it's okay. I'm going to go to.
We're not there yet.
I'm going to go to Greg.
Sure.
So all this idea of sharing economy sounds fantastic, sounds good,
Right.
but there is this counterpart that if you don't own anything, then you don't take care of it. So there's sort of this issue of moral hazard, right? I mean, the whole idea of home ownership in US started because renters don't care of their apartments, people who sit in Ubers don't care about the cars they sit in, but if you own it, you take care of it. What do you think about that in terms of
Yeah,
your
well,
business?
no, I think, yeah, I mean, obviously people bring this whole sort of skin in the game argument to the table, but I think ultimately if you're able to build a product which really speaks to the desires and the propositions that people are really looking for, and you look to and really seek to create and build a community as well, I think not just I think obviously it's really important for Ryan and WeWork, but for us as well. So we run a marketplace. So we have our Zap program, which allows individuals to take a car. They can either buy a car or subscribe to a car, and then you use that car as your own. But then when you're not using it, you can share it with the community. And so, we really look at creating that as the core glue.
So you're not going to own cars. People are going to own cars and they're going to rent it at
So the idea is that we act as a facilitator through our marketplace, where it's really, in that sense, like a P2P structure. And when you have that as a core model, what it does is it actually reintroduces some of that skin in the game, because you're having someone who is kind of de facto sort of owning it in that sense, but it's a very fractional model. And so when you have certain hooks in your product as well, that there's always certain carrots and sticks that you can build in to keep inculcating that community angle. And I think also, since we are not just a car company, I mean, we have cycles, we have electric scooters, so we look at different types of mobility and all of it within self-drive. But the point is that you can, again, back to my earlier point around bundling and clubbing certain elements together to have a sort of a broader package, if you will. And so all of that, you kind of feel a little bit more connected. There's a little bit more of a communal angle for you, which I think is very important for our business.
Okay, let's take the second question.
I have one point on
right.
that. I think also when you talk about sharing compared to owning, I think it's also really a paradigm shift and a value shift. How many people here use Instagram? Right. I don't know about you guys, but when I go on Instagram and I look at all my friends' stories and their posts, none of them are posting about the new fancy car that they bought or the new house that they bought. They're all posting about experiences that they're having, right? Experiences, whether they're going to travel somewhere new or whether they're spending time with people that they care about. And I think this whole idea of owning things as a sense of status is a way of the past. And if you don't need that and you could be more flexible and mobile and even more environmentally conscious, right? Because something, you know, like an Uber or an Ola or a Zoom car actually takes cars off the road and actually helps the environment. I think if you do that and you focus on experiential and the younger generation does that, you're going to see, I think, ownership go, you know, further and further away from that.
But experiences are fleeting. When you own something, you got something tangible, no?
Yeah, but I don't really, well, like, who cares?
But then you're stuck with it. You're stuck with it, right?
But you're stuck with it.
That's what people love subscriptions, that, yeah, part of the allure and the appeal and the sexiness of it is that, you know, you get the next best thing, the next big thing every 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. So, I mean, whether, you know, it's, you know, a car, whether it's furniture, whether it could be anything. So that's what's really, really fascinating about this.
So if I have a choice between a great meal in New York, a 3-star Michelin restaurant for $300 versus an iPad.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the point is that I think people look at sort of, you know, defining these experiences across, you know, whether it's travel, whether it's, you know, food, whether it's music, art, your different hobbies and interests. And I think you're seeing more communities getting built up around these sort of interests, which, you know, makes it, you know, I think so incredibly sort of seductive to go down that path that, you know, it's almost at the allure of having that, say, iPad or whatnot, you know, much less powerful. But also in that, you can also rent, right? I mean, you can also, I mean, a lot of people are now talking about renting electronics. Like there's, I think there's a couple of unicorns out there globally who
we
are
all
doing
don't
that.
need an iPad, we can just share it, So let's go to the second question.
The next question is by Ms. Beena Oblisetti. The third question would be by Angad Singh, and the fourth by Sagar Arora.
Okay, Beena. Just tell us who you are.
Good afternoon, panelists. I'm Beena. I just moved back from the US. I did my master's in Southern California. And I worked for eBay for 1.5 years. And then I moved back with the passion of developing something on my own. My question is more directed to Greg. So while there are numerous car rental apps outside India, in the course of bringing this seamless app-based booking experience, what was the biggest challenge you have faced and how did you overcome this?
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, I think what you always realize in our business is that, you know, while, you know, it can be incredibly complex in terms of just the ground realities and the offline to online component of the business, but you really, just to deliver time and time again, there's just 3 core, you know, aspects that you have to nail every time. One is, you know, making sure that you get your respective vehicle in a timely fashion. The second is that you have to deliver a very clean vehicle. And then the third is that you deliver a vehicle that's in very strong sort of mechanical running condition. And so that's, whether it's a car, whether it's a cycle, whether it's an electric scooter, those are 3 fundamental first principle truths that are always there. Now, you know, that is both incredibly simplistic, but it's also incredibly difficult. And, you know, building a nice, you know, shiny app is one thing, and I think what you find is that as young entrepreneurs, you know, that, you know, sometimes you overvalue and overemphasize that, but it's really, whenever you're doing any sort of consumer product that has an offline component, you know, it behooves you, and I keep telling folks this, but spend the majority of your time, you know, in the offline world. Like, people don't have experience, I mean, by and large, core experiences happen offline, right? I mean, online enables, digital enables that, mobile internet enables that, but at the end of the day, you know, it's whether it's in our business on the car sharing side, whether, you know, it's obviously in Ryan's business, and if you look at, you know, really, you know, anything core on the experience side is happening offline. So nailing that UX and that UI is actually by far the most important, but it's also quite challenging. And at different levels of scale, the challenges are different. So I think that's another critical point, is that, you know, if you have, like in our business, you know, if you have 100 cars versus 1,000 cars versus 5,000 cars, the challenges in terms of that sort of delivery model are, you know, very fundamentally different. And you have to invest very heavily in technology, in our case through IoT and other enabling back-end technologies. But, you know, you really have to be constantly thinking about those increments of scale and trying to be as proactive as you can. So it's both a challenge as well as an opportunity.
So how do you make sure that when somebody gets one of your cars and they return it, they haven't wrecked it up, or they haven't the trouble with the usual rental companies, they spend half an hour just looking around for every scratch and stuff. Is that an issue with you guys?
So we have remote monitoring through IoT, which actually enables us to fire sort of back-end alerts when there might be some challenge, whether it's with the brakes, the clutch, the engine, whether you think about the battery. So those are the 4 elements, of, at least from a car standpoint, that can really go wrong. But we also now have been experimenting with computer vision technology in the car itself to give you audio, visual alerts, feedback around your driving patterns so that you can avoid accidents. Of course, in India, we have, on a per kilometer basis, we have more accidents than any other, and road fatalities than any other country in the world, unfortunately. So it's a major statistic that requires attention, and this is, for us, we believe this is an important place to invest. But it's really about trying to inculcate sort of better decision making for people and giving that feedback in real time around their driving. There's also other nudges that we give for other components, like in terms of just bringing the car back in a cleaner condition. So there's a lot of sort of behavioral psychology that's behind that. So it's actually multidisciplinary in many ways, and I'm not saying that we've had it figured out totally. It is challenging, and that's a perennial challenge you'll face. But I think you have to attack it through technology and through personalization, which is another really important point. Not all of your customers are the same. I mean, you have segments. Any business, no matter what you do, it's going to have segments, and you segment that through the use of data and analytics to understand really what these guys really need, and how you can influence them and impact them to make a strong dent in the business. So.
Okay, who was number 3?
Angad Singh.
So your idea of announcing it ahead of time to give them the mic didn't really work, huh?
Yeah. Hey, so my question's for either of the panelists.
Tell us who you are. What's your name?
I'm Angad Singh. I'm a PGP student here. And
PGP means MBA.
PGP is the standard MBA course. So yeah, my question was for either of the panelists. I just want to ask, how do you understand the complexities and nuances of the local culture when developing a business around a shared economy, especially in a country as diverse as India?
Okay, right.
So can you repeat the question?
His question was, how do you understand the complex cultural nuances of a country as complex as India? Is that
That's correct.
Fair question? Yeah. I mean, one answer both of you gave was it's important to have local partners.
Yeah.
But beyond that, you can't just tell your partner to do everything. Personally.
It's a good question. Yeah, I think local partners is one of them. Hire people from ISB to do research. Actually, our chief of staff who does a lot of this stuff is an ISB alum, as well as our head of sales. They both went here. Partners, and really just trial by fire, a lot of it. A lot of it is being able to make mistakes and pivot very, very quickly. Because nothing's ever going to be perfect. The joke that we've had for the last 5 years is it's almost like building the company is like building a plane or flying a plane while you're building the engine in the air, right? And what you really need to do is be able to make a decision, measure it in a very, very short time period using very, very strong quantitative data, and if that decision doesn't work, learn from it and pivot very, very quickly. And I would say that's something that that is not just applicable here in India, but in any business that you're in. I think some of the challenges that businesses make is they wait too long to make that change. And one of the things you do is really try to build a sense of nimbleness into your organization where you have a flat organization, you can empower people to go out there and make mistakes, and when they make mistakes, to actually pivot from it. A lot of large organizations are challenged with that because it's like taking a cruise ship, and if you want to move it in a certain direction, it takes forever to move it. So even if you have an organization of 100 employees or 100,000, you have to build into it this nimbleness where you can actually make mistakes and then pivot from it, especially when you're scaling a global business where there's no other way about it. You're going to go into local markets, you're going to misunderstand things, and you're going to have to change. So I would say at a high level, that's the thing that you really have to focus on.
That's not a good answer. What are the difficulties? Come on, let's hear them. Let's hear them. What are the difficulties you faced being a white guy from New York? I mean, that's the question. Isn't that the question?
Is this a personal question or a
No.
question?
I mean, look, this is the problem. If I were doing something in the US, nobody would ask, hey, why are you doing it in the US?
Yeah.
Because here we are not so used to people from abroad coming and telling us how to do things.
Yeah, I would say to one of those points. I think obviously, unfortunately, I'm not a Hindi speaker. I can understand marginally, but I have not become fluent in any local language. But having said that, I think what's really, really important is to be able to always project and convince people that you are here for the long term. And because one question that came,
that's an important thing.
One question that came for me very early, and I'm not married, so I think that helps. I'm not married with kids, but people, whether
but if you were to marry somebody Indian, that would convince people you're here for a long time.
That's very true. Yeah,
okay,
I get that quite a bit.
Just saying, okay.
Yeah, no. So I think, but what's important to say is, leaving all that aside, when you have interactions, whether it's with investors or whether it's with business partners or really anyone within that ecosystem, to really show how very anchored you are and that you're not going to sort of bounce on the next flight back.
So you're committed to this place.
Yeah, you have to show a deep commitment, and I think we've been able to do that over the last 5-6 years. But I think that's one component to it, but that's not going to necessarily solve everything. But leaving aside the whole notion of a local partner, but I think it's more about actually who you hire at a regional level. Because as I said, ours is an O2O business. I mean, yes, you have the nice shiny app and all, but everything happens on ground at the end of the day in terms of the delivery of the experience, of the product, of the service. Now you need to empower your sort of, whether it's a regional city head, whether it's an ops manager, marketing manager, they need to feel like they are entrepreneurs, they are owners, they're not employees. So we always say we don't have any employees at Zoom, we just have owners. We have 250 owners. And the majority of people do have equity, but the point of leaving that aside, we want to empower people with that decision-making capability, and especially on ground, most of them happen to come from that area, like in terms of local language, et cetera. Like think about a market, some of you guys might be from Calcutta. Calcutta is a bit of an outlier, right? It's very different from a lot of the other tier 1 cities. So you need to have people who are local, who speak Bengali, who kind of understand that mentality, because it is very, very different from, say, Hyderabad or from Bangalore. And so we have that. And so I think those nuances that are there are certainly important and valuable. And so we allow them to customize, to Ryan's point, in terms of like a lot of the sort of decision making where you sort of fail fast and measure, that's very much there. But it's important to have the right structure and people in place in order to actually do that.
So put the coin on the other side, which is being an outsider in a way probably also gives you an advantage in some sense, right? Is there an advantage? Could you, for example, say, I don't do that stuff. I'm not going to do it. Let's say there's a local person who may have more difficulty saying, I have relationships, I have to do these favors. Does it allow you to walk out of difficult situations by saying, we don't do that? No?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I haven't really experienced that. I don't know if you have, but I think we're playing by the same rules. Yeah.
You play by the same rules.
I think it's, I would agree with that. I think it's not so much that point, but it's more that when people actually, especially in my position as a founder coming in and knowing kind of when you speak to people, they have an understanding and appreciation for the sacrifices that you made earlier. And so I think it goes back to that commitment point. But I think the quote unquote, if there's an advantage per se, it's more that they say, wow, you must be really committed. To come to India and go through and slog that out to make that impact. Like you must really want to be doing what you're doing, which is of course true. But
so people admire your courage, they admire your commitment.
Some they might not understand it fully, but they appreciate that side of it. And that gives us, not necessarily an advantage per se, but it gives a certain sort of emotional connect in any sort of discussion or negotiation, which is helpful because it kind of puts you in somewhat of the driver's seat, no pun intended. Yeah.
I would agree with that. I think there's a certain level, like Greg said, of just respect of, there's not a lot of people that are coming here. I mean, there's some, but not compared to, other parts of the world. So they recognize you as someone who, really wants to do something different and is brave and is courageous and wants to be a part of something big, because everyone knows that everything that's going on in India right now, this is India's time. So being able to want to obviously grow a business and create a team of people here that can can take it to the next level, I think there's a certain level of respect there, sure.
Okay, I like that. It's India's time. Okay.
It's true.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think we're ready with our fourth question. Sagar Arora.
Yeah. So I'm Sagar. I'm a PGP student, MBA student. So increasingly we are seeing the sharing economy companies like Uber, Ola, etc. moving to diversifying their portfolios. Like Ola acquired Food Panda, Uber already has an Uber Eats arm. So particularly to Greg or to Ryan as well, do you see any future acquisitions or any sort of diversification of portfolios in your sector as well? And if yes, then what would be the industries that you would probably see diversifying into?
Sure. Yeah, I can jump into it a little bit. So, yeah, as I mentioned earlier, so we're not just a car company. We're a platform that focuses across the full stack of multimodal self-drive mobility. So whether it's bicycles, scooties on the electric side, as well as cars. So yeah, I think it's really about our internal sort of motto is that we want to be able to give you solutions for mobility from 500 meters to 5,000 kilometers. And so you have cycles that say 500 meters to 2 kilometers, 2 kilometers to 10 kilometers would be, say, a scooty, and then 10 and above would be cars. So you have that entire journey nailed and planned. And I think I was actually up in Delhi a couple of days ago for this Move Summit, and where so the PM was there talking about his vision for India, and I think what came out from both the PM and then a lot of other sort of folks who were present was that at least within mobility, when you think about these adjacencies and these sort of diversifications that you're talking about, it's more about creating a full stack user journey. So, in the reality is India's civil infrastructure is borderline pathetic, right? And it's not going to become that much better over the next 10, 20 years. It will, but the point is that there's so much urbanization. So I firmely believe that India will always have substandard civil infrastructure. Now that doesn't mean that there's any sort of job, that just means a great opportunity to build solutions on top of that. And it just means that you'll have different business models, different innovations to come in and solve that. And there's nothing per se wrong with that. So the point is though, when we think about where it's heading in terms of, and I won't comment on the acquisition point, but in terms of the adjacencies, you're seeing the world of mobility at least move towards this sort of convergence where you think about, okay, I'll have a metro ride. Now Hyderabad's building a great metro line. You have something where it's a metro, and then you connect to electric scooter, you connect to a bus, and so you have this sort of string and this sort of mapping which is there. And having something which you can design which will allow for that sort of seamlessness, that frictionlessness, so you don't want to have any friction in that part of the journey. So really from a platform layer standpoint, how can you deliver that? How can you build that for a user to make it just better and better, again, to get around the city or to go from point A to point B or to even go around the city outside. So it's just about helping make it less, really removing all that friction and making it more and more seamless. So that's where we see it over the next 3, 4, 5 years.
So what you're saying is that it's not just diversification, it's having a very broad idea. So instead of you thinking of yourself as a car company, you think of it as a solution to a mobility problem. Yeah. And that expands. So
you need to have the platform approach, and which is why Uber and Ola. Part of the reason is that they're trying with food. It's a very strategic move. Is that they want you to be as loyal, as sticky on their platform as possible, so they can retarget you, obtain more data, have a better, more personalized engine. It's also something which can potentially lead to more profits over time at a platform level. Look at companies like Meituan in China, which is now the 4th largest startup in the world, that are on 55 billion. So they're just IPOing now, and Didi has gone this direction. So you're seeing that all of these players are moving more towards this super app sort of approach to platform, where you kind of, in some ways, you start off as a mobility company, but then you move into all these other consumer services. So that's an interesting phenomenon that's also taking place. You see it with Grab in Southeast Asia, you see it with Gojek in Indonesia.
And Ryan, you are WeWork, WeLive.
Yeah.
What's the next We?
On that point, the next We. Like that. On that point, it's really around what is your mission statement? And your mission statement as a company can be bigger than just the product line that you're in right now. So our mission statement is to help our members create our life's work, really. And when you think about that, and you think about it outside of work, and you think about the idea of community is really everything. So if you look at some of the acquisitions that WeWork has made recently, we recently acquired a company called Meetup. I don't know has anyone ever been to a Meetup?
Yeah.
Cool. Actually, India is one of the biggest markets for Meetup. But Meetup has one of the best mission statements. Their mission statement is to use the internet to get people off of the internet. But when you actually think about what their model is community. So from an acquisition standpoint, if we're going to grow through acquisitions, it's going to be focused around community. Another one of our acquisitions is a school called the Flatiron School, which is a coding school, which again is bringing people together through education. We just opened up We Grow, which is an education platform for students, and it's a different way of educating our youth, and that's really focused around community learning. So the one thing that's constant across all of these product lines is we in the name, but also the idea that our USP and what we really care about as a company and our mission is creating communities, the best communities around the world. And if you look at it from a broad picture, you can do that across a number of different product lines.
Awesome.
The last question for the session will be by Vasushri Baid.
Hello everyone, I'm Vasushri. I graduated from ISB last year. So my question is more to Greg. So Zoomka partnered with Mahindra on electric mobility. So what was the vision behind that? Was it more than the sustainability aspect of your personal belief, or is there more to it?
Sure, no, it's a great question, and I'll give a bit more of a nuanced answer to it. Now, to set the context for electric mobility in India today, I mean, it's not just about thinking around cars, right? So you can be thinking about two-wheelers, you can be thinking about three-wheelers, you can be thinking about buses, you can be thinking about trucks. You could be thinking about a whole host of different applications within those 4 or 5 modes. Now, in India, when you look, of course, India is an incredibly price-sensitive, value-sensitive market. And if you look at the average car, just to talk on cars, you see the average car price is less than $10,000. So you're looking at around 6 lakh, 6.5 lakh or so is the sweet spot car price. So it's very clear that price value matters a whole lot. And for electric cars, for us, and we think about it in the shared mobility context, we realize that people today, given the price point of electric cars specifically, leaving the other modes aside, you're actually in a scenario where the actual upfront capex of the car is about 30 to 40% too high. Even though, of course, electric cars, the value prop, the big USP, is that when you run the car, so the more you run, the more you save. Now, why is that? I mean, one, the obvious reason is that you don't have liquid fuel. So it's diesel and petrol you don't have, so you're saving 90% there itself. But what some people don't realize is that the electric car is also 80 to 90% cheaper to maintain on a per kilometer basis, rupee per kilometer basis, for the simple reason that you have so few components. So you actually have 25 components, pretty much in the whole car, whereas an IC engine, you have hundreds. You literally have 200, 300, depending on the OEM. So the point is that when you think about electric shared mobility, electric, it's really very cheap once you get it out there running. The trick is, how do you handle this capex, right? And so the reason why it hasn't really taken off on the personal side in terms of electric cars is because of that reason. Now, when you have shared mobility and you have, let's say someone can pick up a car, buy a car, or subscribe to a car, which is in our case, and you actually then can really disrupt, because what you do is you, again, allow this fractional sharing platform where someone can use a car, an electric car, for, let's say, 10 days, 15, 20 days out of the month. And then those other 10, 15, 20 days can list it on our platform and share it with people around you in the community. And that's really powerful, because you can reduce the cost by 50, 60, 70, 80%, depending on how, your monthly cost, depending on how much you're using it. Now, what that effectively does is it drops the capex by that amount, right? Because you think about it over that time horizon, how much saving is actually there. So you all of a sudden have made electric mobility incredibly affordable, and the value proposition very much real today. Without government subsidy, without mass manufacturing scale, without all of this. I mean, you hear a lot of rubbish in the papers where people talk about how the government needs to step up and do all of that in terms of subsidy for charging infrastructure, et cetera. It's all nonsense. I mean, it's not required. It's really business model innovation solves that today, as we're showing and as we're proving. So with Mahindra as a partner, both from an investor standpoint, they're an investor as well as just a very strong OEM partner. and they realize, and Anand Mahindra as well, he's very aligned to this broader vision of shared electric mobility, and in terms of the value proposition from a cost standpoint, but also from convenience and just a flexible, sort of frictionless model standpoint. So yeah, I think it's really just the very beginning. I would say that over the next 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you'll see just a whole lot more in this space. So it's a really exciting time.
Thank you so much, Ryan and Greg, for sharing such insightful and wonderful stories. Thank you, Professor Chaudhary, for
we still have 4 minutes.
Session.
We still have 4 minutes. Really? Are we done?
Yeah, we're done with the session.
I'm sorry, this is 4 minutes.
We're on schedule.
You're on schedule. We started late though. What? Okay, I have one last question. Okay, one last question. She's tough, man. So here's a question that comes up. MBA students talk a lot and struggle with this idea of work-life balance.
I don't know if we're good to answer that.
I'm probably not the best person
Whatever
to
we say,
talk
don't
about
listen to it.
work-life balance.
But I think it's a myth. I don't think there should be anything like work-life.
So I would say
just do what you like, and then you want to do it 16 hours a day.
Yeah, I would say.
What do you think?
I would say, so I think Jeff Bezos has a great quote on this, where he doesn't talk about work-life balance, but it's much more about sort of that harmony, where you have this. But I think for me personally, my view is very clear: is that if you absolutely love what you're doing, I feel like I haven't worked a day in the last 6 years. I mean, yeah, technically I've worked every day in the last 6 years.
Yeah.
But I don't feel that way. I feel energized, I feel refreshed, and it's about having outlets, right? I mean, whether that's sports, whether that's music. I mean, it doesn't take a lot of time, right? It could be a couple of hours a week to have that outlet. It's not like you need to have 40 hours a week of leisure where I'm just like sitting there becoming like a total airhead watching Netflix for like 4 hours, 5 hours straight, right? So I think there's when you think about balance, it's all relative. And I think it's really about.
I say no balance. Just go and work all the time. Do what.
It's just about following your passion, right? Do what you love, and it tends to work out.
I would say on that, I agree. That's our phrase, do what you love. That's literally our slogan. So I agree 100%. I think the word success is the most subjective word in the English language, right? So successful to me could be something completely different than what your success is. The really good way to look at it is, what do you define as success? If family is success for you, you have to find a time to have family. If being, spiritually and physically content is important to you, you have to find a way to do that. So really defining what's important to you in terms of what success is the first thing that you have to do, and then really finding a way to make that happen. So I could argue, I eventually want to have a family, I'm a single guy. You could actually argue that even though I'm in the role that I'm in, I'm not successful because I haven't had that family yet, right? So success is different. Define what it is for you, and then find a way, even if you're working 16 hours a day, find a way to make success, your definition of success, worth it, because I think that's the most important.
Okay, and one last quick, one piece of advice. So if you were coming here looking for ISB students to hire, if Zoomcar was coming or WeWork, what is that one thing you would be looking for?
I would say without question, it's the ability to think from a first principle standpoint. I think too often you find folks who are just kind of running and gravitating and just immediately jumping into something with an answer, with a thought process. But I think they fail to distill the core problem statement, the core value proposition, et cetera, down to its essence. And I think that's what, when I've had and interviewed and I talked to great candidates out there, and I think about in our leadership team, I think that's one area which people across really excel at, which I think is super important. And too often, I think maybe MBAs could lose sight of that.
No GPA. You never asked for GPAs, right?
No. I mean, you all got in here with high GMATs, right? Everyone's smart, so it's really irrelevant.
Okay. You don't care about GPAs. Okay, good.
I would say two things. One is the commitment to the mission. So you guys are going to leave and you're going to go work somewhere. You should not think about what the title is going to be, how much money you're going to be making. The only thing you should be thinking is, am I committed to the mission that this company has?
Not think about how much money you should be making?
Forget about the money. Listen, if you work, and Greg will attest this, I'm sure, he just said he works a ton and he never feels like he's working. If you work for the right company that you're really, really passionate about, you're going to be good at it and the money's going to come. So that's first and foremost. The other thing I would say that's the most critical thing that
Is it just a way of saying you guys don't pay very much?
No comment on that.
Okay.
No, I think we pay well. But the other thing I would say,
Okay.
just to close, is the most important thing in my mind of what differentiates someone who's a long-term superstar to someone who's not is their ability to overcome bad shit happening, right? And that's not only professionally but personally as well, because like that stuff does not discriminate. Regardless of who you are, bad shit's going to happen to you. How you actually respond to that and turn a negative into a positive is going to define a lot of how well you do professionally. So the ability to take setbacks day after day after day and be able to come back the next day with positive energy and find ways to think creatively to turn negative situations into areas of opportunity, that's what I look for most when I'm hiring someone.
Okay, now we are on time. 0000. Thank you both very much.
Thank you very much.